So is the clock ticking down to another political standoff in 90 days? Or can Washington move past this era of partisanship to do what's best for the country? Joining me now with his take is Matt Vasilogambros, a staff correspondent for the National Journal covering foreign affairs, the White House and Congress. Welcome to The Heat.
Thank you for having me on.
So lots of relief this week in Washington, around the country, around the world, in fact. But what has been resolved, really? This is temporary. Have we just kicked the can down the road?
Well, some senators would say that there's a new era of bipartisanship, that they're going to find a solution, that they're going to come together with this conference committee, with Paul Ryan and Senate leaders, and find a solution. But we talked to some House Republicans earlier this week, and they still think that there's a fight, and this was just a preparation for that fight.
So it could happen again.
It's likely to happen again.
We're going to see a repeat performance come next year. You know, we often hear that the United States system of government, the way things are designed, the way the framers put this Constitution together, is built for gridlock. That's the way it should be, that nobody's going to get their own way. You've got to give something to get something.
Right.
But this shows that that's not working. We've seen dysfunction now.
Well, there have been, throughout history, there's always been disagreements between political parties. But if the government shut down every time there's a disagreement, you know, nothing would happen. There would be a lot more shutdowns. So I think it's a little unacceptable. I think people would say that we're going through this stage. I don't know what can happen. Maybe there is a solution with voters.
I guess in the past, where there's been disagreements, it's pushed the two sides to find common ground. Mm-hmm. In this instance, that didn't happen.
No, but the president is hoping it will. He says that we almost were on the brink of default, and we lost $24 billion. The parks closed. All these people were furloughed. It was an awful situation. They say, and he thinks that since this happened, maybe it won't happen again. But again, that's a very difficult thing to promise, especially when you have the Tea Party caucus of the Republicans in the House who are promising another fight.
Right, you know, you call it a fight. And, you know, we often like to see these things using a sports metaphor. There've got to be winners and there've got to be losers. Right. Were there any winners in this?
Well, conventional wisdom would say that President Obama and Democrats were winners in this. Republican polling is at all-time lows. Even some Republicans are tired of their own party. Now, President Obama spoke earlier this week, I think on Thursday, and he said that his tone showed that there really wasn't any winners or losers in this whole thing, that we all lost. I mean, he had to cancel a trip to Asia that was very pivotal for a trade agreement. And the world is looking upon the United States, and they're wondering whether or not we are stable enough to be a reliable partner.
You know, shortly after we heard that this deal has been done, and in fact, while the vote was taking place in Congress, the president came out into the White House newsroom, the press room at the White House there, and he was very magnanimous. He wasn't playing the blame game, and he said, look, you know, we're all Americans. I'm so glad that this has been put together. Now let's move ahead. Let's look to the future. But earlier on, there were accusations that there was a lack of leadership, because when he said, I am not going to negotiate, this is not negotiable, a lot of people, and so some would say, you know, validly, a valid point, that this is not leadership if you just stand out and say, I'm not going to talk to you.
You know, I agree, and I think the point he was trying to make is that if you have a point and you really want to make it in terms of policy, that you can't shut down the government or threaten the full faith and credit of the United States if you want to make that point. Now, he's also trying to make a positive, or have a positive tone, because he still has plenty of legislative agenda items that he wants to get done, including immigration and a farm bill. And he mentioned those on Thursday morning and Wednesday night as issues that he wants to go ahead with. Now, if Congress can actually get their act together and pass a farm bill or pass serious immigration reform, that's a whole other question. But for now, he wants to sound as if he's willing to talk more, that there's some room with House Republican leadership, not the Tea Party minority of the House Republicans, but that he can probably get something done.
You know, you mentioned the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, as it's also known. This is the president's piece of legislation that will bring insurance coverage, health insurance coverage, to millions of Americans who currently don't have that kind of coverage.
Right.
There is this wing of the Republican Party that is fiercely opposed to this particular law, and it's already on the statute books. This has been passed by both houses. It's been sanctified in the Supreme Court as well. It is the law of the land, but they want to degut this law, they want to destroy it, they want to defund it, etc. Have we ever seen that happen before, where one party that doesn't like a law says, we're going to destroy it by bringing in budgetary considerations?
I can't think of an example in modern times. And I don't think that, or excuse me, I think that many Senate Republicans who are not part of that faction who want to defund Obamacare, like John McCain or Susan Collins, have been vehemently outspoken against that tactic. They think that there was an election, and elections have consequences. And that issue should have been resolved in the 2012 election with the election of President Obama. And these are Republicans saying this. So
and it was resolved.
Right, it was, and even went before the Supreme Court as well. Yeah. And so a lot of politicians, including Republicans, are saying that shouldn't be an issue that you should go after, that it should be more of debt reduction or trying to have a balanced budget for the first time in many years. And so those are the priorities that Republicans are trying to go after, and they see that Obamacare is more of a distraction. That could lose Republicans a lot of clout, and we saw it in the polling. The polling is not good, and neither is it for Tea Party Republicans as well. So I don't think that running against Obamacare is a tactic anymore.
And we'll probably see how that bears out, those polling numbers bear out in the midterm elections, which is coming up. You know, there are very deep divisions politically in this country ever since this president came to the White House. And in many respects, it's governing by crisis. We lurch from one crisis to another. Is that become the norm now, that we just govern by crisis all the time?
Unfortunately, I do think it is. I mean, as long as there is a majority Republican House, a majority Democratic Senate, and a Democratic president, or any mixture of that, it seems like they're going to use either the debt ceiling as leverage or the funding of the government as leverage. And if the president doesn't want to negotiate on any terms, then it's only inevitable, wouldn't you think, that this is going to happen again. And it's unfortunate because there has been a lot of job creation. The markets do seem to be inching a little bit closer. There's been a slow recovery, but a recovery nonetheless. And you think that if there was some sort of government stability, that recovery would be better.
Now, here's something about this crisis. Where was the public outrage? I mean, here we had a group of politicians, a small group of politicians on the Republican side, who were quite prepared to hurt the American economy to a large extent. The public largely apathetic.
They are, and I think you saw that apathy a little bit in sequestration. Here was a thing that would take away your flyovers.
Now, sequestration, that's the automatic cuts.
The across-the-board automatic cuts that really did a number on the Defense Department and across the entire federal government. And this was an accident. It wasn't supposed to be this way. And Democrats and the president thought that public outrage would be so much that Republicans would be forced to the table to resolve this issue. And it never happened. Even though that many things that we hold dear, like flyovers at baseball games or even military bases, their preparedness, it wasn't there. And so I think what you saw in sequestration is a little bit happening here, that the public is just resigned to the fact that this is going to happen and that some of the government is not going to function properly and it might shut down. And I think Republicans thought they could gain an upper hand. You saw some members go to the World War II Memorial here in Washington that was closed, and they gave speeches. They broke down the barriers. They thought this would be a great PR thing. And even the National Republican Senatorial Campaign, the political arm of the Senate, they even did advertisements on it. And it really didn't work. I don't think that there was a huge public outcry outside of the district, outside of D.C.
There are two parties that dominate politics in this country, the Democrats and the Republicans. We've seen this dysfunction. We see the deep divisions. Is it time for a third party?
Well, Pew just released a poll recently that said that 39% of Americans are fed up with their members and they are willing to even vote them out. For a while, there's been a lot of anger against Congress. Their approval ratings are in the teens, usually, but that anger is never translated into voting. Now, voters, if that trend continues...
That's right. 90% of people said they will vote for the current incumbent.
Even though they dislike Congress as a whole. But now they're saying, now this poll says 39% say they will vote against their own member, even if it's in their party. And so if this sort of anger toward Washington continues into 2014, maybe, or 2016 for that matter, maybe you can see a viable third-party candidate. I have not seen someone who could carry that leverage, but it's more than possible, especially considering some of the more moderate candidates, Republicans, John Huntsman or Peter King, or on the Democratic side, there are plenty as well that might make a stand there.
Matt Vasilogambros, thanks for joining us.